Hello, Network to Code community. My name is Tim Fiola. I'm a developer advocate here at Network to Code, and today we're going to do a walkthrough for how to teach Nautobot a new ChatOps subcommand. This will be the agenda we'll be following. We'll just walk through a quick setup of the dev environment. Then we'll talk about how to set up a bot for a chat platform, be it Slack, Teams, WebEx, Mattermost. I will go ahead and show you how I created a simple chat command. And then I'll go through a little more in-depth example of how I created a functional chat command. And this is with very little experience on my part with ChatOps and Nautobot working with the code. So this can be done by just kind of a normal person who knows his way around code or her way around code. And is interested in teaching Nautobot a new chat command. So this is going to be really exciting. The intent here is to show you how to craft a Nautobot ChatOps subcommand. It is not to explain all the mechanics in the Nautobot ChatOps repo code. You don't need to understand all the underlying mechanics to create your own subcommands, which is awesome. And I'm living proof of this. You only need to be able to understand code and reuse code, which is one of the great things about the Nautobot ChatOps platform. And then before we begin, there's a few capabilities that you'll need. You'll need to install Invoke. You'll also need Docker and Docker Compose installed as well. A couple references real quick here on how to fork repositories. And there's information on that in the Nautobot documentation, as well as Nautobot's Docker Compose workflow. And there is the link for that as well. That is also in the Nautobot documentation. Okay, let's go ahead and get our development environment set up. The first step in that is to create a fork of the Nautobot plugin ChatOps repository. So this is the repository, and if you head over to the right-hand side, this fork button, if you click on it, I've already forked this repository, so it's going to give me a link to that. So I will go ahead and follow that. If you don't have a fork of the repository yet, that's fine. Go ahead and create fork, and it should take you over to the your forked repository as well. Okay. Now from here, we need to clone this repository locally. So I am doing this from PyCharm, but you can do it from whatever IDE you like. I'll go ahead and paste that in there, and we'll go ahead and create the clone. Awesome. So this is our local copy of our repository. Perfect. So let's take a look at our remotes. So you can see here that we only have one, and that's our forked copy. That's the origin. We also want to create an upstream remote linked to the original ChatOps repository so we can submit a PR against the original repository. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to add the original repository as the upstream remote. So we go ahead and do that command right here, git remote, add upstream, and then the original repository URL. So now if we take a look at git remote again, you see that we do have this upstream repository here, and it is the original repository. Great. So let's go ahead quickly and take a look in the development folder. This has some information for developers in here. So you see that there's this creds example env file right here. We want to copy that, and we want to rename the copy into the name of the copy that we're going to use. We'll go ahead and copy that file. We'll keep it in the same directory and just rename it creds.env. So then if we look at the development folder again, we have the original, and then we have the copy we just created with the creds.env name. Perfect. So let's take a look at our containers. So right now we don't have any containers running as expected. So at this point, we're going to do the invoke build command, and this command will build our containers for us. These are the containers running the code that we're going to develop against. This might take a moment. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and hit invoke start. This will start up all the containers. And again, this might take a moment. Okay. Now if we look at the, now if we look at the Docker PS, we see 4 containers running as expected. Perfect. We'll go ahead and clear the screen now for this next section. Awesome. Okay, for this next section here, we'll go ahead and create a super user. This is going to be the user that the username and password that we use to log into the Nautobot web UI when it's running. So we'll go ahead and invoke create super user. Now, if we just do this, the default username will be admin. But we're going to go ahead and just say, I'm just going to say user super1. Pardon the loud truck braking outside. Don't worry about that. Great. So we don't have to provide an email address if we don't want to. All right. So what I did is I just went ahead and created a super user admin. The username was super1, and I just created a password for it as well. Again, this will be used to log into the web UI when it's time. Now we're going to talk about configuring a bot for the chat platform. And this part involves actually setting up the bot on the chat platform itself, meaning Slack or MS Teams or WebEx or Mattermost, where you actually go to that service, Slack, MS Teams, what have you, and configure the bot service on that platform itself. Now, I'm going to go ahead and refer you to a couple different resources we have here because we do have material on this. The first one is for a Slack bot setup, and that is a video on on YouTube. That's called Get Up and Running with Nautobot ChatOps on Slack. That's a complete video walkthrough for how to set up and configure Slack and Nautobot to support a Nautobot chatbot on Slack. The other one is a blog post we did by a friend of mine, Matt Vital, that talks about setting up Nautobot ChatOps with Microsoft Teams. It walks through the Microsoft Teams workflow to get a bot configured. So I'm going to refer you to those two resources before you go further to set up a bot. And then finally, those two resources I referred you to, those are also available on our Network to Code new community, repository. Thank you. Sorry about that. Our new community repository, where we list our content library for everything Nautobot. All the Nautobot content is here. And this includes those two resources I just pointed you to. Okay, so with that, if you have not done so already, I'd ask that you go back and set up a bot on either Slack or MS Teams, whichever one you prefer, since we have material on it. All right, the next step we'll do is we need to create a branch here. And before I do that, I just need to do a quick housekeeping item here. I need to make sure I'm authenticating with SSH. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and then verify that I've got that authentication set up now. Now let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and create a branch. So we're going to do git checkout new ChatOps CMD, new ChatOps command. All right. So we're on that branch, and now we want to go ahead and push that branch up to our origin. So we'll do a git push origin new ChatOps command. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and take a look at our go to our forked repository here, and let's go ahead and take a look at the branches. And new ChatOps command is there as expected, so that's fantastic. All right, so let's get on with the coding here. Okay, now that we have our GitHub, our Git branch defined, and we've configured the chatbots on whatever platform we're going to use. Now it's time to go ahead and configure some credentials in one of these files that we created earlier. So back a few minutes ago, we created this creds.env file in the development branch, and these will hold, among other things, our bot authentication codes um, for our chatbots we created. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and populate them right now. So for instance, if you did Slack, you'll want to populate your Slack API token as well as your Slack signing secret token. And I also went ahead and configured a Microsoft Teams bot. So I'll go ahead and paste those values in as well as that password is right here. Okay, so I've configured credentials now in this creds.env file um, for both a Slack chatbot as well as a MS Teams chatbot. Okay, so with that, we've made some changes now, and these changes percolate up into the Nautobot config.py file. So since we've made a change to that file, we need to do some things here with our containers. So if we go to our containers and just take a quick look, what we want to do is we want to invoke stop. Then we want to invoke build, so to rebuild the containers. And then the next thing we want to do is invoke start to start them back up. Then what we'll want to do is go to our Nautobot UI and let this thing reload here, let these containers get warmed up. Okay, there we go. We have our UI again, and we are still logged in as Super1, the super user we created earlier. Perfect. One thing we want to verify while we're in the UI is the access grants. So what I'll do is I'll go to the plugins, then I'll go to the ChatOps access grants. And this is how I have mine configured. It's wide open. They're all stars everywhere for everything. So it'll work with multiple chat apps, everything. And I'm doing this for demo purposes. In a production environment, you'd probably want to do something a bit more targeted. So that is that. Okay, now that we have our bot credentials set up in creds.env, the first thing you want to do is just check Nautobot to make sure we have connectivity. Now, I happen to be running ngrok in my environment for my internet access, and so I'm going to go ahead and pull up my chat bot here, and never mind my development environment clutter here. What I want to do is just in my environment that I configured the Slack bot to work in, I just want to see if I can get to Nautobot. And I can. So this tells me I'm communicating with Nautobot just fine. So this is great. So now let's go ahead and start doing a recon of this code. Now the first file we're going to look at is in the Nautobot ChatOps folder. It's called workers, and it's nautobot.py, and we'll go to that right now. Nautobot.py, this is the code that interacts with the technology. In this case, that technology is Nautobot itself. So let's just go ahead, and what we're looking for here is we want to start out with just a subcommand that returns output of our choosing, just to kind of ease into this environment here, because if you're not familiar with this code, you might not want to jump into a really complex example. So there's a few different commands we can look at here. If we go back to Nautobot, we can say Nautobot, and this about one looks pretty promising. Okay, it just returns a simple piece of text when you do that. Okay, another one, and I'm going to use this as an example just because I'm familiar with it is get circuit providers. This is another command that does not take any input, but that returns output in the table format, like this. So this is interesting to me. So what we can do now is try and craft a test command that just returns output and see how that goes. So let's go ahead and look at these two in the code. If we go to about, we see that we just have this simple code here that just gives us some markdown blocks returned. And notice that there's this dispatcher here. The other one we're going to look at is the get circuit providers. And what I'm doing is I'm just guiding you through my process to get familiar with this. So let me go ahead and take a look at get circuit providers, since that was another simple command that didn't take any input but returned some table output. And again, we have this dispatcher, this send blocks here. So we keep seeing this dispatcher peppered throughout these commands, and these are pretty simple commands. This dispatcher keeps coming up. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that dispatcher is. So in our code here, we have a directory called dispatchers. And in this case, I'm going to look at slack.py, although the dispatcher, since this code is universal, designed to be made with any chat application that the ChatOps works with, this dispatcher is going to be a generic call. And which dispatcher function gets called depends on which chat platforms you're speaking with. So in our case, we'll go to slack.py, and let's go to Slack dispatcher. And one of the commands that we keep seeing is, for instance, command response header. So here we go. Cool. So here we can get a feel for what information this is taking, this call is taking. And we can kind of get a feel here, and there's really nice doc strings here. So you can take a look at those. I'm not going to guide you through my entire creative process because that would be ridiculous. We all have our own, right? I'm just showing you what I did to get familiar with the code. So with this code, I went ahead and crafted a chat command. So what I'm going to do is get that chat command and paste it into code, and then we're going to take a look at it, okay? So I'll go back to my nautobot.py file, and I'll just go all the way to the bottom here, and I will just paste in the generic response command that I crafted using just what I saw in those sections we just looked at. So this is just going to return more cowbell. That's all it's going to do. So we have our dispatcher here and our send blocks, which we looked at in the file here. We have our send blocks command here as well. So using that, I just crafted this command, and some of it was guess and test, some of it was looking at the code. But so now this command is here. So now let's go ahead and take a look and see what our chatbot has to say. So, and this is really cool about the development environment. Any changes you make to the code will appear, will automatically be run by the containers. So let's just do a Nautobot command again. Okay, here is our new command. Here's the command we just added. I just pasted it in. So if I go ahead and do that command, okay, we have a command here that just returns text, which is exactly what we wanted. So this got us familiar with using the outputs without asking for any user input. User inputs are what we're going to work on in the next section. Okay, we are heading into the home stretch here, so we'll go ahead and get to it. We're going to design a functional chat command now. This command will prompt the user for some information, and then based on that information, return some other information from Nautobot. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to create a command that will basically let the user specify a circuit And then based on the circuit they specify, it'll tell you what that circuit connects to on each end. Does it connect to an interface on a router? Does it connect to an interface on a patch panel? Does it connect to another circuit? I want this chat command to tell me that information. So one thing we need to do as we're looking through this nautobot.py code here in the repository is find a command that's already very similar to what we want. And I've already gone ahead and taken a look at it. And get rack is what we want to do. So let me go ahead here and let's go to the public Nautobot, to the public Slack workspace for network to code to the Nautobot chat channel. And then let's just go ahead and demo this get rack command. So it prompts me for a site. I can select a site, and then it prompts me for a rack. I can select the rack, and there we go. It returns this output in this this table form. This is what we want. So what we're going to do, what I did here, is I ended up just heavily hacking this command. But this get rack command, it was quite easy to work with because this is the flow I want. This does exactly what I want. It prompts the user for a couple pieces of information and then returns some other information on it. Now, speaking of the Nautobot technology and whatnot, one great resource to call on when you're developing a Nautobot subcommand is the Nautobot shell. And we can get to that Nautobot shell by doing invoke nb shell in our dev environment. So this is an interactive Python shell with all the database models pre-loaded for us. Okay, cool. So we can do something like, I'll paste these in so you don't have to watch me type them. But this will give us all the circuits. So if you look, we got circuits. Okay, cool. And then we can do something like we can do dir circuits 0. We can see what actions we can do on the circuit object here. We can take a look at that. We can do something like this. One of these options here is a trace, which looks like what I want. So I can do the circuit 0 termination a trace. And this gives me the object that the circuit terminates on. On side A, it goes to a cable, then to an interface. So I can go ahead and I can call that interface object, and then I can find out what that object terminates to. It terminates to this the specific router. So the point here being, use the Nautobot shell environment, especially when you're developing for the Nautobot subcommands, because it's a great way to figure out how to structure your queries to get what you want. Now, given all that, I'm going to go ahead and just paste in here all the code I did to get this command working. Then I'll demo it real quick. So I went ahead and pasted it in, and one more thing to go here. A couple more imports. Okay, cool. Now, if we go back to my personal workspace, Vandelay Industries, let's go ahead and see what Nautobot knows. Okay, it knows the get circuit connections now. Perfect. And that is so cool how you can just put the code in and the dev environment picks it up and makes it able for you to run that code. So let's go ahead and demo this command, Nautobot get circuit connections. Okay, I prompt for a provider. Just like in the get rack, it prompts me for one thing. And now it prompts me for what circuit I want. Okay, cool. So this is the output that we got. On side A, it terminates to a circuit, and on side Z, there's no side Z connection in the database. That's great. Now we have a command that does what we want. And we got this command simply by hacking a command that's already there. So you don't need to be an expert in the mechanics. I'm certainly not, of how this works. What you need to be able to do is just be able to understand how to hack a command. And hopefully what I've just shown you helps in that effort. Hey, I'm fading back in real quick here because I realized I forgot to demo this on the MS Teams chat application. If you recall earlier, I configured the credentials for authentication towards the beginning of this video. So let's go ahead and get to it. So we can do Nautobot, and just like before, it'll give us a list of things it knows. And there's get circuit connections, and so let's go ahead and add that in here. Select a provider, and now we select a circuit. Okay, now this gives us the same information in a slightly different format, and that in part is because Teams has a different dispatcher. So if you recall, there was a generic call to dispatchers in the nautobot.py file. There's dispatchers all over the place, but as we also saw, each each chat platform has a different dispatcher. So definitely explore the dispatchers, get to know them. They're a key part of this whole process. And finally, to wrap this up, um, I am in the process of submitting these new commands, not the more cowbell one, but the get circuit connections and a different command that I crafted as well in a PR to the Nautobot ChatOps repository. If you'd like to view the code, you can go ahead and if we go to the Nautobot ChatOps repository and look at the pull requests, um, my PR is 2 new chat commands, and that PR is 91. So that is in the process right now of going through the approval and the back and forth conversation about how to tweak it. So if you want to see the code that I ended up crafting, please feel free to go ahead and take a look at this pull request. Awesome. Well, this wraps up the presentation. Have a great day and happy coding.